The use of merchandise to enrich and prolong enjoyment of entertainment properties is not a new practice. Indeed, franchises such as Star Wars and Transformers have seen the majority of their revenue coming from merchandising. But within the realm of video gaming, it hasn't been quite as lucrative a venture. Outside of Pokemon, which sits as the highest grossing entertainment property of all time, largely thanks to its sales of merchandise, only Mario sits in the list of the top 25 highest grossing media franchises of all time. Still, that doesn't mean merchandise doesn't have a place with video games, and although it wasn't all that common back in the 80s and 90s, the use of merchandise as part of the promotional cycle has now become a pretty standard practice for a lot of big video game publishers. Square Enix are no exception, and in some ways, they've led the way by creating their own merchandising division. This houses numerous products, such as various PlayArts figures, art books, and even some finer jewellery. The range is quite extensive, but not all pieces of merchandise are made equal. Some are much rarer than others, owing to the circumstances behind their creation and distribution. And throughout this video, we're going to be running through some of the most sought after pieces of Final Fantasy merchandise that have been created over the years. As a tie-in, this video has been produced in collaboration with itaikuji.com, a retailer who specialise in selling merchandise for gaming and animation properties. Due to being based in Japan, Itaikuji has access to a whole host of merchandise that never gets released internationally, such as these Final Fantasy VII Remake chocolates. If you'd like to indulge yourself, you can get 300 yen off your first order by using the code FFUnion300 at checkout. And if you'd like some inspiration, there are some links in the description below to pieces of merchandise that we've got our eyes on. As part of their promotional drive for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Square Enix produced a significant amount of merchandise, and one range that was well received were the music boxes. So far, music boxes have been produced for Aeris' theme and the main theme, both based on music from the original game, but 2 new music boxes are planned to release next year based on the remake soundtrack. But even though these are adorable, due to them being designed for mass market consumption, their scale and quality pale in comparison to a similar themed piece of merchandise that was produced almost 2 decades ago and has since become one of the rarest pieces of Final Fantasy merchandise ever created. The Aeris theme music box was commissioned by DigiCube, a subsidiary of Square that was created in 1996 with a specific task of handling merchandising. They reached out to famed Japanese music box producer Nidex Sankyo for this particular collaboration, and it's rumoured that 1,000 were commissioned for production alongside a similar number that would play Radical Dreamers from Chrono Cross. In the case of Aeris' music box, it's said that each one needed to be personally selected by Nobuo Uematsu before it was deemed acceptable, but during this long-winded process, DigiCube could not overcome its poor fiscal performance and ended up filing for bankruptcy. This led to production halting, and it's believed that only 100 of each music box was ever produced. It's made them quite sought after by collectors, and they have been known to sell for tens of thousands of dollars. Indeed, one of the Chrono Cross music boxes is currently up for sale on eBay for £17,000, or around $24,000. Due to production halting in such a sudden manner, it's also possible to hunt down versions of the music box that did not get selected or were completed after DigiCube had gone bankrupt and were thus unlicensed. But even still, they are known to sell for thousands of dollars. Final Fantasy XII featured some amazing visual designs, courtesy of Akihiko Yoshida, and one of the most striking designs was that of Judge Magister Gabranth. Such was the imposing nature of Gabranth that he was chosen to adorn the game's box art in Japan and Europe, And in 2008, a few years after Final Fantasy XII had released, he was then selected for a very unique range of merchandise that would, we believe, be the only ever entrant into the Square Enix Artifacts range. The Judge Magister Gabranth helmet was produced by longtime collaborator CocaCola, and it was unlike any piece of merchandise ever produced for a Final Fantasy game. Serving as a direct replica of Gabranth's helmet from inside the game, it was produced at a 1:1 scale. This made it a quite sizable asset, and due to it being made of metal, it also weighed almost 20 kilograms. Being produced by CocaCola, the level of craftsmanship was impressive, and it was also made to be functional, as noted by numerous owners of the helmet having posted pictures of themselves wearing it. Only 500 of these helmets were ever made, and they retailed for $999 each. Nowadays, they are very rare, and they seldom become available on auction websites, but you can sometimes find them randomly in Japanese stores, as shown by this Reddit post from 6 years ago. After resolving their differences, Square and Nintendo worked together to produce a very unique Final Fantasy game for the GameCube called Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Unlike many prior games, it saw Final Fantasy transition into being an action RPG, and it brought about some extreme innovation by allowing gamers who also had a Game Boy Advance to use that system as a controller, giving them access to a second screen. Their efforts were rewarded, as Crystal Chronicles won numerous awards, including the grand prize at the Japanese Media Arts Festival. And to celebrate, a special console bundle was created that included a glossy white DOL 101 version of the GameCube alongside a glossy white controller and the intriguing Game Boy player that allowed people to play handheld games on their big screen. But only 150 were ever produced, and they were never sold to the public. Instead, they were only made available via a Japan-exclusive competition that was run in Shonen Jump magazine. It has made this particular GameCube very rare, and ConsoleVariations.com lists it as the rarest GameCube ever produced, if you exclude units that were intended for the developers themselves. As such, it sells for a hefty fee, and there's one listed on eBay right now for almost $4,000. When Final Fantasy VIII launched, there were quite a few interesting marketing tie-ins, and perhaps one of the most unique was that Squaresoft teamed up with Toyota to create a competition whereby anyone who pre-ordered the game in North America could be entered into a competition to win one of 4 brand new Toyota Echoes. In Japan, there was also a competition related to Final Fantasy VIII, and this gave away a very unique piece of branded merchandise that has no real relevance today. The MiniDisc format had been brought to market in 1992 as an alternative to the cassette and CD. It got off to a slow start, but by the late 90s, it had gained some significant momentum and was quite popular in Japan. To capitalize on this, Square teamed up with Coca-Cola for an extensive collaboration that was exclusive to Japan. Upon purchasing Final Fantasy themed bottles of Coca-Cola, it would have been possible to collect seals and send them into various prize draws. The first offered the chance to win one of 10,000 Final Fantasy Coca-Cola special boxes, which would contain a t-shirt, a box of figurines, and some postcards. Another offered the chance to win one of 5,000 Final Fantasy themed mobile phones and watches, and the final draw offered the chance to win one of 5,000 Final Fantasy VIII branded JVC MiniDisc players that featured the Griever symbol. It's quite difficult to get hold of one of these nowadays, but they do appear on eBay every now and then, such as this listing that's on for $230, even though the MiniDisc player is broken. The launch of Final Fantasy VII was monumental, and it's reported that around $100 million was spent on marketing. In North America, this translated into a holistic marketing plan that was unlike anything ever seen before when it came to video games. And thanks to a document procured by Polygon, we know that this included print ads, TV ads, promotions such as a demo disc and in-store advertising, licensing deals, interviews and access for the enthusiast and generalist press, appearances at trade shows, direct marketing initiatives, and pushes by PlayStation themselves. They also wanted there to be a heavy 12-month push by the PR division, and this led to a huge integration with Pepsi. In addition to integrated TV advertising that appeared after American football games, sizable pop-ups were created that featured Cloud next to a Pepsi can, and custom Pepsi cups were created too. But the coolest aspect was that those who purchased Pepsi products that were part of the campaign could enter themselves into a prize draw for the chance to win one of 50 Final Fantasy VII Varsity jackets. Due to how few were ever made, it makes this particular piece of merchandise one of the rarest around, and there are reports that they sell for between $700 and $1,500 when they are put up to auction due to just how rare they are. The next piece of merchandise on our list is quite different from the others mentioned, as even though it started out as a specific one-game brand collaboration, it has since grown to become a multi-game promotional initiative. For the Japanese launch of Final Fantasy VII, Square teamed up with Zippo, an American manufacturing company known for their lighters, and they were commissioned to release an exclusive set of Final Fantasy VII themed lighters. The complete set included a lighter for all 9 protagonists, with Sephiroth being included to make it an even 10. 5 were given a pale silver colouring, and 5 were given a dark chrome colouring, and only 3,000 of each lighter were ever manufactured. At the time, they retailed for 9,000 yen each, or around $75, but due to the limited quantity, those prices have now skyrocketed to double or triple the original value. A few years later, 4 new Zippo lighters were created for the release of Final Fantasy VIII. The first was dubbed the Sleeping Lionheart, and 3,000 of these were produced too. Alongside a lighter that had the Griever emblem embossed on the case, it came with a stand that housed a replica of Squall's gunblade. This also sold for 9,000 yen, but now has a much heftier price tag. Individual lighters were also created for Squall and Rinoa, and another that only had 400 ever made focused on the Seed logo and came in a special metallic container. No Zippo lighters were created for Final Fantasy IX, but they were then created for Final Fantasy X, X-2, 12, 13, Advent Children, and Dirge Cerberus, but for each of these games, only one Zippo design was ever created, and even though the base price continued to rise, they were still only limited to 3,000 units each. It has made them quite sought after due to the level of craftsmanship, and having a complete Zippo collection will need a significant investment in terms of both time and money. But none of the pieces of merchandise we've featured so far hold a candle to what we're about to showcase, and that relates to both its rarity and its cost, should you ever wish to try and own it. In the build-up to the release of Final Fantasy XV, Square Enix did pretty much anything they could to try and get attention. It saw them host a grandiose event called Uncovered. They did unsubtle brand tie-ins with Coleman's and Cup Noodle, buddied up with influencers like Epic Mealtime, signed on musicians like Afrojack and Florence and the Machine, hired Japanese fashion brand Rowan to create outfits, and produced a CG movie called Kingsglaive, where they attempted to leverage the star power of Sean Bean, Lena Headey, and Aaron Paul. And it was in relation to Kingsglaive that they produced a stunning piece of functional merchandise, a custom-made Audi R8 sports car called the Star of Lucis. In relation to Final Fantasy XV's lore, the Star of Lucis was created following a collaboration by Audi and the Royal Art Society of Lucis to celebrate Noctis's 20th birthday. It then featured in the Final Fantasy XV prologue called Parting Ways, and in Kingsglaive itself, where it was driven by Nyx. In reality though, the Star of Lucis was produced by Audi as an actual car that could reach speeds of 300 km an hour thanks to its monstrous engine and aerodynamics. Just before the launch of Final Fantasy XV, Audi then held a lottery to sell the car, with the entry fee for the lottery placed at a whopping 50 million yen, or around $470,000, which was approximately 2 to 3 times the price of a standard Audi R8 with a similar specification. Whoever ended up winning the lottery has since attempted to exploit its rarity, and the Star of Lucis has appeared at auctions for around 260 million yen, or around $2.4 million, which I'm pretty confident in saying makes it the most expensive piece of Final Fantasy merchandise you could possibly hope to own. But yeah, with that, I think we're done. They were 7 of the rarest pieces of Final Fantasy merchandise that we'll probably never own. Let us know in the comments below which you found to be the most desirable, and of course, if you enjoyed the video, then please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Reigning Eckham and Logan Nijay, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.